Chetapantes, that's Greek for hey y'all, and thanks for joining me for a few minutes to learn about research in the field of classical studies at LSU. My name is Wilfred Major. I'm an associate professor of classics in the Department of World Languages, Literatures, and Cultures in the College of Humanities and Social Sciences at LSU. So I'm going to take just a minute to explain the field that I'm in. We just call it classics. Classics refers to the study of all aspects of Greek and Roman cultural traditions. Since those are often blended together, we can call them Greek and Roman traditions or Greco-Roman traditions or simply the classical tradition. And I also want to address briefly two controversies and misunderstandings about our field. One is that if you study classics, that you are idealizing everything that the Greeks and Romans did. And this has never been true among classicists. Classicists have always found things that are wonderful to emulate and learn from in that way, but there have also been many things that you do not want to repeat that the Greeks and Romans did. And you learn from both aspects of that. That's really key. Another thing is that classics is somehow inherently elitist. Um, it's elitist if only elites engage with the tradition. Um, I personally was not raised as an elite at all. I've never been an elite, and I'm still very much enthralled by this tradition. I really want more people from different backgrounds and interests involved in this, and that's how classics will continue to be more than just an elitist field. So I hope you'll join me in that. Classics is just so huge. It's all these things that happened in antiquity, plus the impact of that tradition on the world that we live in today. Within that, my research has two particular strands in this enormous area. One is the performance of ancient Greek comic theater, and the other is the teaching, what in Greek is called the pedagogy, of beginning and intermediate Greek language courses. So I'm going to give you examples of each of those. So I want to talk about the performance of ancient Greek comic theater. I'm talking about performing ancient Greek stage comedies. From the first 1,000 years of Greek theater, which ended when the Christian church shut down Greek theaters in the 6th century, we only have 13 comic scripts in Greek. So that's not a whole lot to work with, but we also have archaeological remains of many ancient Greek theaters, drawings of performances, masks, costumes, things like this. We also have fragments of other scripts, and I'll give you an example of that. So what can we do? A wonderful example is what happens every couple of years in Lynchburg, Virginia at Randolph College, where they happen to have a full-scale replica of the famous Theater of Dionysus. And so every 2 years there they perform a complete Greek play using masks and costumes in the theater as they would have been. They perform in English, but in every other way, they try to perform it as it would have been performed in Greek antiquity. And you can see some pictures of that here. We also like to perform these plays in new and exciting ways. So in the past year or so, as you can imagine, we've been performing plays on Zoom a lot. A really interesting project is called the Theater of War. You can visit their website and see their productions. They use Greek tragedy rather than comedy to have conversations that are very difficult now. But when you work with Greek tragedy, it gives people a new way to talk about some of these challenging issues. So that gives you some idea what people in my field do. More locally, we had a classic student graduate in May. Her name is Marie Plunkett, and she annotated and translated Menander's Arbitration. We only have about half of this play. In fact, it was completely lost for centuries, but now we have about half of the script. So she translated it freshly, and then in April, directed a live performance of the play on LSU's campus at LSU's own Greek theater. And since ancient Greek theater was masked, she did something clever, and she combined the masks that we all have to wear for the pandemic with masquerade masks to create a full face mask as ancient Greek actors wore. My other area, remember, is the teaching, the pedagogy of beginning and intermediate Greek classes, primarily ancient Greek, though we're adding modern Greek to it. Now, when I took over the Greek program at LSU in 2005, ancient Greek was largely taught the same way it was in about 1850. And that was great for 1850. It was not so great in 2005. So LSU has become a pioneer and a national leader in figuring out ways to teach Greek better in ways that are appropriate for the 21st century. And so if you take Greek with us here at LSU, that's what you'll get to do. Toward this end, we've created an entirely online digital Greek textbook called Ancient Greek for Everyone. You can take a look at it. If you take beginning Greek with us, this is what you use. But this is informed by our research about the best ways to teach Greek now. Once you get beyond beginning and onto intermediate Greek, we also create new and different types of things to read and engage with from Greek antiquity. There's a lot of interest in Stoicism in the world today. So my colleague Albert Watanabe created a reader from an ancient Greek handbook of Stoicism that introduces Stoicism to you by a man named Epictetus, who was himself a freed slave. So he's an interesting character and has lots of interesting things to say about how Stoicism works and how you live your life that way. His next reader, by the way, is going to be Euclid's Elements. This is Euclid's introduction to ancient Greek geometry. Euclidean geometry is named for Euclid, and it's an interesting thing to study as well. You might think about the Pythagorean theorem, which we famously think of as a squared plus b squared plus c squared, but that's algebra. That is Arabic mathematics. Euclid didn't have access to that yet because that came later. So how do you do things like the Pythagorean theorem when you don't have algebra? Well, if you read the Greek of Euclid's Elements, you can figure out how to do it. So we try to come up with things like that. I was a math major as well as a classics major, so those things always interest me. Another example of types of projects that we have going. Another classics major who graduated in May, Joseph Bemis, is a member of the Greek Orthodox Church and wanted to do something in that context. So he did a project on intermediate reader with the Byzantine liturgy associated with St. John Chrysostom, most common version of the liturgy. So it includes the Greek and help for Greek readers, but also has links to audio recordings so you can hear them speaking, singing, and the music that goes with the liturgy. These are the things we're trying to do in the 21st century. There are many, many more projects like this, hundreds of things. Both of those projects, by the way, were funded by Humanities and Social Sciences Aspire program, which supports undergraduate research. And we want to do projects like you've just seen and many other things too. If you are actually on the STEM side of things, you might be surprised to know that even though Greek art and literature and philosophy is so famous, more scientific writings survive in Greek than any other type. And we really need to make those more accessible and available to young readers of Greek. And here's just a little interesting example. This is from a manuscript from a history written in the 11th century in Greek, but illustrated a century later. And you can see an early drawing of a Greek flamethrower using the infamous Greek fire. These are the kinds of things that as a professional I know about and I find really interesting, but we want to find ways to complete our research so they can become accessible to a wider audience. As you can imagine, that keeps me very busy because we have all these things to do. If you are interested in this kind of research, we teach 3 different kinds of courses. CLST courses, classical studies, those are courses in translation that give you surveys and beginning introductions to our field. The Greek and Latin courses are in the language, so if you use your language requirement to fulfill Greek and Latin for those 2 years, after you've completed those 2 years, you can start working on projects like these. So thank you for your time. I hope this is interesting, and I hope that I will hear from some of you about these kinds of work. You can reach out to me at my email. And I'm also expecting that many of you are new to LSU if you're in the course, so welcome to LSU. I hope the experience has been a good one in these difficult times. Thank you again for your time, and I look forward to meeting and hearing from many of you.